Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, FY 2021 Visiting Fellows Program, hosted by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. At this time, I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Betsy Griffith, Associate Deputy Director, Ruzi Kozulbash, Associate Deputy Director, Christy Brackens, Acting Associate Deputy Director, Vince Davenport, Associate Deputy Director, and Becky Rose, Senior Policy Advisor, all with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Becky is going to be starting us off today. Becky?
Thank you so much, Daryl, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see the participants on the line, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues here, as you can see on this list of presenters, and we'll get to hear from all of them throughout the presentation. So today we're going to touch on a couple of things. We're going to just give you a quick overview of OJP and BJA, just in case some of you are unfamiliar with our organization. We'll talk a little bit about the fellow solicitation and kind of from an overview perspective. And then we'll talk a little bit about eligibility. And then we're going to dive in, and this is what we'll hear from our colleagues about the areas of focus. As you can see in the solicitation, there are 12 different areas of focus, so we'll talk a little bit more in detail about those. And then I will wrap us up with some grant requirements and just a quick review of application sections before we get to the question and answer session. We have left a good amount of time at the end for Q&A, so as you're hearing the folks present on this webinar, please feel free to, kind of jot those questions down or type them in the Q&A section, and we will get to that at the end of the presentations. So just some quick overview on kind of who we are. What the Office of Justice Programs is a division within the U.S. Department of Justice. Our primary goals are to provide grant funding, training, research, and statistics to the criminal justice community. There are several divisions within OJP, but OJP is one of the 3 grant-making components of the Department of Justice, which also includes Office of Violence Against Women and the Office of Community Orienting Policing Services, or otherwise known as COPS. Now, BJA is one of the divisions within OJP, and our mission is to provide leadership and services in grant administration and criminal justice policy development to support local, state, and tribal justice strategies to achieve safer communities. If you're interested in becoming a fellow and you're not that familiar with BJA, I would definitely strongly encourage you to visit this website to learn more about all the work that we do across the criminal justice system and with our partners at the state, local, and tribal level. Now, what we're talking about here today, on July 2nd, we released the Fellows Solicitation. It's called the Visiting Fellows Program. Mentioning the deadlines up front here, we'll talk about them again at the end, but there are 2 deadlines, and I'll talk about the 2-step application process at the end, but the 2 deadlines that you need to make note of are the grants.gov deadline on August 2nd and the Just Grants deadline on August 16th, and I'll talk a little bit later about what that means. Now, just to dive into some kind of overview information and background information on the Visiting Fellows Program. So BJA has identified a need to address emerging issues and build capacity within the administration of criminal justice. We initially launched this program back in 2012, and we've kind of had it throughout the year since then. Not every year, but have had it available throughout the year since then. The overall intent is to leverage state, local, and tribal subject matter expertise to assess areas of need and to develop strategies and different policies, and really to collaborate with BJA and the field to provide an overall benefit to the criminal justice field. The purpose of each fellowship is to make important policy and programmatic contributions, make these recommendations to BJA, and help us prioritize, direction in some of these priority areas for our criminal justice practice in the field. You will collaborate closely with BJA and DOJ staff to provide this outreach and this research and, most importantly, the subject matter expertise to inform the development of new BJA strategies and programs to benefit the field. Now, for this particular year, we're so excited to be able to host up to 12 fellows with our current year's funding. We hope that we'll collaborate with practitioners, advocates, and researchers to build capacity to address gaps in priority and emerging issues in the criminal justice field. We strongly encourage, as is demonstrated across these 12 different program areas, we strongly encourage applicants from a broad range of disciplines to consider how their work in those areas might relate to to these different areas, anticipated areas of focus, which we will talk a little bit more in detail about in a minute. In general, our fellows that we work with are expected to be what we describe as self-starters, but you can kind of take action on the work that we've discussed and can work in a fast-paced environment. Additionally, fellows must be proactively be able to manage their planned work while collaborating with BJA staff and, of course, adjusting to the needs of the project and work areas across BJA as the needs arise during the fellowship period. Excuse me, you will be expected to produce specific deliverables that can address priority issues. We'll talk a little bit more about deliverables in a minute. And also, the expectation is that as a fellow, you would help BJA in enhancing strategies and building capacity and bringing their fellowship experience back into the field. And that's a critical piece that I want you all to think about as you're considering applying for this funding, is that not only are we looking for you to bring your subject matter expertise to us, but we hope in the end that you can bring kind of your experience and engagement with BJA back to the field once the fellowship is complete. So overall program objectives, and these are all listed in the solicitation, but to highlight a few of them. Number one is to enhance the BJA capacity and expertise to assess the technical assistance, training, and capacity building needs in the areas of focus. We really want you all to bring that real-world experience and knowledge to us at BJA as a grant-making component and as a component that provides a lot of training and technical assistance. That real-world experience will only help us and enhance our ability as staff members to deliver relevant and effective tools to the field. We also hope that you'll support the development of criminal justice practitioners, researchers, and BJA and OJP staff to advance the mission of BJA and OJP. Advance and translate knowledge about criminal justice issues and strategies that will help us to promote innovation. Now, eligibility. You'll see on the kind of the cover page and the second page of the solicitation, there's a lot listed there about eligibility, but the most important thing to note is that eligible applicants are limited to individuals, as well as individuals within state, tribal, local government organizations or academic institutions seeking to provide federal level experience for one of their staff members. So if you're affiliated with a national, organization, for example, you can come kind of as a member of that staff and sponsored by that national organization. So organizations here, as it's noted, seeking to place an employee as a fellow under this program will not have programmatic oversight of that staff person. That will, be maintained by BJA, nor those activities conducted as part of the fellowship. But again, it's kind of providing that real life experience to BJA and then hopefully bringing that back to the organization or the individual department that you might work with. A couple other program requirements, and then we'll talk a little bit about deliverables, and then we're going to get into the program area specific information. But each fellow will be expected to complete a major set of deliverables that will address these, kind of critical or emerging issues in the criminal justice field and build capacity, which I've said that word quite a bit, but you can understand the emphasis on that. We really want you to help us, think about, grow, innovate, and build the capacity of our existing programs or topic areas. And then in order to enhance the knowledge building work of BJA, fellows will be expected to participate in a wide range of work, potentially with the BJA director and other BJA staff across the portfolios. You'll provide subject matter expertise that kind of really gives us a kind of exposure to what that looks like in the field. So helps us at BJA and DOJ understand what are those critical issues facing the field and the current practices that are in place and where there are gaps. So you'll have a wide range of opportunities to participate in high-level policy discussions and processes that inform practice. And you'll be expected to take this expertise, as we've talked about, back to share with the field again. Okay, so just touching on the deliverables a little bit, I want to note that these are all listed in detail on page 7 and a little bit into page 8 in the solicitation. But each fellow will be expected to complete a major set of deliverables that will address some of those emerging issues, which we'll talk about in a minute, in the criminal justice field and address one of the areas of focus. In addition, all fellows will be expected to engage in the following kinds of activities. Assess BJA's current training and technical assistance resources, using data to assess needs of the field, examining and translating research and evidence into programmatic and policy implications for practitioners, plan and implement or enhance strategies to engage in regular dialogue with the field, create at least 2 major TTA deliverables, at least 2, that's the expectation, but it most likely would be more, participate in internal and external meetings, forums, conferences, etc., prepare detailed reports, speeches, and articles at the request of OJP and BJA management, participate in professional development and training activities, obviously in consultation with BJA management, and then potentially travel to support the execution of the above activities. We'll talk a little bit about budgeting later in the call today. So that just, again, gives you kind of a high-level overview of the expected deliverables. We do expect that there, would be deliverables specific to the different program areas that we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay, so now we're getting into the bulk of the presentation here, but we're going to hear from our colleagues. So as I mentioned at the beginning, there are 12 different areas of focus for BJA Fellows for this year. And those are all listed in the solicitation starting on page 8. In the solicitation, they're listed in order. We're going to go a little bit out of order, but they're numbered. The numbers correspond to what's in the solicitation. But just for ease of presentation, we're going to have the Associate Deputy Directors talk about those areas of focus that fall within their current portfolios. So you'll see kind of a little bit number ordering out of order, but again, it's all listed on page 8, and my colleagues will go through those details. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Betsy Griffith to talk about our first set of areas of focus.
Thank you, Becky. And thank you for making time today, and we are very excited to see your interest and hope you will consider applying for a fellowship at BJA. Again, I'm Betsy Griffith, and I oversee the Courts, Communities, and Strategic Partnerships team. So obviously, it's clear we do a lot of work with courts and the communities that are such a key part of the work we do around community safety and public safety. The team also does quite a bit of work to engage with researchers and others in multifaceted partnerships that really can kind of tackle tough issues. And so I'll talk about a couple of those priorities today. One area where we do this kind of collaborative work that is in the court system is through our Drug Court and Veterans Treatment Courts program. And so our first fellowship is really seeking to enhance those strategies to help us effectively support the field in managing crime related to substance use disorders through strategies, including the Drug Court program. This fellow will work with us to support our Drug Court and Veteran Treatment Court training and technical assistance program and activities, and we have a set of providers that we work with on that. Also to generally provide that training and technical assistance to the field in ways that can help support the implementation or enhancement of the operations of drug courts, the thousands of drug courts across the country. These courts integrate evidence-based substance use treatment, mandatory drug testing, incentives and sanctions, and transitional services. And so we really want to have someone come in and dig in with us on these issues and help us think more strategically and more deeply about how we can continue to improve this proven program. And in particular, work with us to focus on key issues, including the impact of pandemic on the operation of courts in the problem-solving setting, ensuring fairness in our courts through access to treatment for everybody, access to recovery support services, including medically assisted treatment, and thinking about how problem-solving courts and other strategies with people with substance use disorders can serve as alternatives to our incarceration and ensure that equity and access, as I mentioned, not just to the program, but also to the kinds of services that folks receive and the responses of the courts to those persons. And we've got a couple of good tools that are out there we'd like to be able to build on, and also to increase collaboration with other partners, including law enforcement. We're looking for somebody who really has direct experience working with drug court operations and research, and would be able to bring their experience and knowledge to work with us on this, and really encouraging, whether it's someone who's a practitioner or an advocate, and in particular, folks who are in recovery or who have been drug court graduates. We really value your perspective and encourage you to consider applying as part of this work. And as I mentioned, this is something where you'll work very intensively with not only our partners, but a strong network of state drug court coordinators that we have across the country. The second fellowship that we're looking for on our team is an effort to really focus on another aspect of operations of courts, and that is the responsibilities relating to the Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and really enhancing efforts of state, local, and tribal courts to be able to enforce the requirements and provisions of the Sixth Amendment. We have a national training and technical assistance program, so this fellow would work with us and that set of providers, where we really support state and local governments, helping them build the capacity that they need, and also providing tools there to be able to meet these obligations that we talked about. This includes ensuring access to justice and fairness in the system through improved court operations and capacity to really think about and strategize and improve those systems. Also making sure that courts and their partners are thinking about the right to speedy trial and enhancing the right to counsel, the right to defense counsel, particularly at first appearance, which also can be part of the strategy around equity and access to everybody for the system. Again, we recognize pandemic has had a big impact on court operations and would want this fellow to be considering those things as part of the work, and to support and highlight collaborative efforts that are happening across the country to be able to support the role of public defenders as part of the Sixth Amendment work. And for this reason, we're really seeking somebody who does have direct experience working in public defense, and someone that has the ability to bring their experience and knowledge to be able to support this work around the Sixth Amendment. The third area that the team is going to be focusing on is our work with communities. And we're really trying to connect several programs that we have in the portfolio that I'll be talking about today, with the goal of building the capacity of community leaders to really be working with their partners, including law enforcement, to enhance community safety and also to build trusting long-term relationships. So the fellow that we're seeking would be able to support BJA strategies around community capacity building, and also making sure that we're kind of developing and elevating models of how community leaders can serve as active and effective partners in being able to maintain, improve community safety, including work around community violence interventions. The fellow would work in conjunction with programs we have in our team, including the Byrne Criminal Justice Innovation Program. And so if you have questions, I encourage you to also research that on our website. And as part of that work, we're doing to develop a community trust training where we're working with law enforcement and communities together to sort of think about the best ways to accomplish that. And as part of that, supporting this work by helping to build listening sessions and assess strategies to assess community capacity to be able to inform that work in the future. It will also be someone who help us think about that community perspective in other projects, including our work in location, where we bring courts into a community through community courts, our work around restorative justice and community conferencing through our National Center on Restorative Justice, and work that we're doing under our Emmett Till cold case investigation that includes working with communities that have been impacted by civil rights related homicides and lynchings prior to 1979. So really going back and kind of working with these communities and understanding the history to be able to build that trust and relationship moving forward. The fellow will focus on issues facing these communities, think about how we can build communication and partnership strategies that build that trust, and co-define strategies together for safety in neighborhoods. We note here that these relationships cannot be built overnight, and so really we want folks who are interested in working with us on going to the communities where there's the greatest need and where we can build strategies that can be sustained over time. So we're really looking for somebody who has direct experience in building community capacity and working to, or has had experience working on community justice or community violence interventions and can bring that experience to the table in the work that we're doing and work with our TTA providers. And the last one for my team is looking for someone to support a new portfolio that we have that we're building this year at the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And that is to advance strategies that prevent and respond to hate crimes. We are currently issuing new funding opportunities at BJA under the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Act. And we'll be identifying a new training and technical assistance provider to work with us as part of that program, and also are offering site-based funding. And so we're really looking for someone to come and help us build this project as we're launching it this year and build it from the ground up, working with us in trying to think about how we accomplish the goals of the program, which would include working with state, local, and tribal law enforcement and prosecutors and their community-based and nonprofit partners to be able to support outreach, education, and really engagement of those impacted by hate crimes, crimes that can be associated with one's actual or perceived national origin, race, religion, gender, sexual orientation or identity, or disability. And so the person would work with us to really develop strategies to support the investigation and prosecution of hate crimes, and really that outreach to really understand the challenges to reporting, the challenges to engagement of victims, and ways that we can effectively implement these programs and create a culture where there is trust and willingness to work between victims and law enforcement and prosecutors, as well as training for the staff and capacity building of the staff to be able to effectively pursue these cases. And because of that, it would also not only require coordination with our new training and technical assistance provider, but some of the other Department of Justice components that are working on the hate crimes initiative at the department. And so we're really looking for somebody who has experience in preventing and addressing hate crimes and can bring that experience to BJA and thoughtfulness and energy. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ruby Kozelbash, my colleague, to talk about other fellowships.
Thank you, Betsy. As Betsy said, my name is Ruby Kozelbash. I'm also an Associate Deputy Director with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and I am privileged to lead a team of folks that focuses on corrections, reentry, and justice systems reform. And I'm going to talk about three of the corrections-related fellowships that we have available this year. The first one that I'm going to talk about is improving a fellowship that's going to focus on improving corrections and reintegration under the Second Chance Act. And here we are looking for a fellow that has significant reentry policy and practice experience, and including, as a policy advocate or a legal or social services provider, or perhaps an academic that has focused on successful reintegration of people coming home into communities from a period of incarceration in jail or prison. We are looking for the fellow to be formally incarcerated themselves, so someone who can bring the unique perspective of lived experience within the justice system and having returned home and gone through the reintegration process, coming home into their community from a period of incarceration in jail or prison to the role. In fact, anyone without that experience, lived experience, will be screened out at the basic minimum requirements phase of the review process. We are looking for potential fellows and those that are interested in applying. They're strongly encouraged to propose their own strategies and innovations on how BJA can improve our investments within reentry and reintegration. BJA, under the Second Chance Act, offers a number of grant programs available to states, localities, tribes, also nonprofit service providers in the reentry, treatment, housing, and employment-related services space. And we are looking to innovate and make improvements, and we're looking to see what are the needs of the field and innovative ways that we can address them. So an applicant with significant experience in leading reentry policy efforts at the state, local, or tribal level might be interested. For instance, a reentry coordinator, or a reentry advocate with experience in collateral consequences of criminal conviction. And that could be in any number of spaces. For instance, the collateral consequences with regard to securing housing, education, employment, healthcare, accessing their voting opportunities and rights. You could propose as a prospective fellow innovative ways that BJA could be more responsive around those issues within our funding opportunities and our technical assistance provision. We'd also be looking for you to propose ways that you could review and then document successes of those efforts as we would seek to implement them. We really do strongly encourage applicants to submit innovative proposals. We want you to think about BJA's national efforts to date and ways that you could add to those and ways that we could improve those. Also want to note that the individual would have an opportunity to provide strategic guidance, not just to the corrections policy team here at BJA, but also to the Bureau of Justice Assistance Director, to the Office of Justice Programs leadership, and potentially to inform federal interagency policy efforts around reentry, and could assist in removing federal barriers to successful reintegration. So that is our Second Chance Fellowship. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about the second corrections-related fellowship that's available, and this has to do with BJA's efforts and the department's efforts on improving sexual safety within confinement facilities, and that is through the Prison Rape Elimination Act that was passed many years ago, back in 2003-2004 timeframe. The PREA standards were implemented in 2012. So we're going on 10 years of PREA implementation efforts, and we are looking for a fellow who's got substantial expertise here as a policy advocate, or perhaps as a legal or victim services provider, an academic, or a criminal or juvenile justice practitioner that has focus on preventing, detecting, and or responding to sexual victimization of people who are incarcerated. So here we're looking for a fellow that can support and enhance the ongoing efforts of BJA's PREA Management Office. So the PREA Management Office resides at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and we have responsibility and oversight for PREA implementation efforts around the country. And those requirements are really defined by the PREA statute and some amendments that have been passed to that statute in recent years. The national PREA standards as they relate to all covered confinement facilities, and the PREA Auditor Handbook that BJA has published in 2017. And we really encourage you to look back at some of those resources to get a handle on what all of the requirements, statutory, regulatory, and programmatic that BJA has. Here, we're strongly encouraging applicants and prospective fellows to submit, again, innovative proposals on ways to address a number of PREA challenges. I won't go into all of them, but they're all enumerated within this section in the solicitation. So I'd really encourage you to take a look at what we feel would be most beneficial for the field in terms of challenges that we've spotted over the last 10 years that are preventing all of the covered facilities and jurisdictions from becoming fully compliant with the PREA standards. Here also, it's expected that the PREA fellow would be integrated into a team. So in this case, the PREA Management Office, but could also have the opportunity to participate in the Department of Justice PREA Working Group and provide strategic guidance around PREA implementation to BJA and OJP leadership. The third corrections-related fellowship that we have, thanks Becky, is on enhancing corrections spaces and cultures. So here we're looking for a fellow that is going to initiate their own project to focus on how to best support corrections agencies' efforts across the country to transform jail and prison environments, including physical spaces, staff culture, and the purpose here is to create environments and cultures and spaces that make it more likely to ensure that people who are incarcerated or detained there are better prepared for successful reentry and reintegration into communities. We are looking for the fellow specifically to address the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on corrections populations, and in particular to focus on the practices and innovations that successfully reduced correctional populations and to look at which ones are possible and worth sustaining. The fellow, we're looking to have a deep experience within corrections, including with correctional populations, perhaps with corrections physical plant challenges and innovations, on correctional culture change initiatives, and have the ability to bring that experience and lived expertise into the fellowship, and to provide recommendations and to support innovative projects within any one of those spaces. Here, we're also looking, the fellow could bring the unique perspective of having been a formerly incarcerated individual themselves and have lived experience within the system and within a correctional facility. And lastly, here, the fellow would have the ability to coordinate and integrate with BJA policy members and help inform our training and technical assistance practices. So that wraps up our 3 corrections-related fellowships, and I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague, Christy Brackens.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christy Brackens, and I'm acting right now as Associate Deputy for the Law Enforcement Innovation and Crime Prevention Division. Similar to my colleagues, we have 4 potential fellowship opportunities. So I'm going to talk about our first one, which is in our Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program. This fellowship opportunity is looking, well, first of all, the program itself provides funds and services to jurisdictions to support cross-system collaboration to improve public safety, responses and outcomes for individuals with mental illness and co-occurring mental illness and substance abuse who come in contact with the system. And so this particular fellowship will be looking for someone to help us develop products and information to share with practitioners and law enforcement professionals. So we'd be looking for someone that can help us work across those different disciplines, as well as help us convene focus groups, meetings, webinars. We're looking for someone that actually has direct experience in behavioral health and criminal justice work, so someone that could bring both those things to bear for us, and that can use that information to support national TTA. Similar to some of the things that have already been said, I would encourage you to look at, the Justice and Mental Health solicitation, training and technical assistance solicitation that's out there, to give you an idea of the sorts of things that we do related to training and technical assistance in this program. The next fellowship opportunity would be a fellow to support the National Law Enforcement Knowledge Lab Initiative. This is, I think, a great opportunity because this is a completely new program that we're standing up. The solicitation actually for national initiatives is currently available online, so I would encourage you to take a look at that solicitation. It's Area 1 of the national initiatives that's currently posted. But what we really want to do, this, like I said, is a brand new program for BJA, and so this is the fellow in this program would assist us with promoting outreach, communication, and engagement activities to law enforcement agencies and stakeholders that increases awareness of BJA's of this particular lab. And since it's brand new, it's really an opportunity to have to help us build something great. So the fellow would work with experts to help us develop trainings and assessments in various products. They would assist us, again, with the launching of the Knowledge Learning Lab. And the person that we're interested in as far as this fellowship opportunity would have significant knowledge and experience with law enforcement training, with evidence-based practices, constitutional policing, civil rights reviews, consent decree processes, policy development, project implementation. And so those are the sorts of things that we are looking for as far as a fellow. But again, this one, unlike some of this particular fellowship, is very focused on helping us develop a new program. So it's like building something from scratch as far as the National Law Enforcement Knowledge Lab Initiative. the next fellowship opportunity is related to violent crime. You know, you can't turn on the TV without hearing about the different spikes in violent crime that we're seeing across the country. Almost every major city across the country is experiencing spikes in violent crime, and places that didn't have violent crime problems before are experiencing increases in violent crime. And so this fellowship opportunity would be to help BJA coordinate a lot of our violent crime and prosecution initiatives, as well as some of the community violence initiatives that we have. So the activities would include, you know, working with some of the providers that we currently have, helping us do a better job of communicating the resources that are out there and engaging with our traditional partners, but also with non-traditional partners around activities to better help those better address and respond to violent crime. We want to work with local law enforcement on how to implement programming that better addresses violent crime, the importance of use of crime analysis tools such as social networking analysis, looking at the different resources that are out there to help drive violent crime strategies, and then looking at how we can, you know, coordinate our federal efforts with local efforts, and looking at helping jurisdictions come up with citywide strategies to help them better address violent crime. When we think of the ideal person for this fellowship, we're looking for someone that has extensive experience in combating violent crime at a local level, that's familiar with evidence-based practices, and that has law enforcement experience, because this would be key in helping us develop some of the deliverables out of this fellow, which would be training for law enforcement, engaging with practitioners in different listening sessions to help us inform some of the TTA products and some of the things that we'd hope to do. And then, you know, as you work with jurisdictions, we'd want someone that is able to work with us on how to assess law enforcement programs and strategies that they're doing, but also in their capacity to combat violent crime or crime in general, but also in working with communities. So this fellow would be someone that has extensive, again, experience in combating violent crime at the local level and familiarity with evidence-based programs. The final fellow that we're looking for is someone to assist us in our prosecution work. And so it's similar to the violent crime work in engaging with law enforcement. This person would be engaging with our prosecutorial stakeholders. You know, violent crime, when crime goes up, it not only affects law enforcement, it impacts every aspect of the court system. And so we'd be looking for a fellow that can work specifically with prosecutors who are in these jurisdictions that are experiencing increases in violent crime, and help them, you know, increase awareness of the different BJA resources, TTA, that's out there that can help them navigate this unprecedented terrain that we're now in, as well as help us in developing resources for them, publications or guides that can help them better address the increases in violence, you know, navigate the reopening of the court systems, things of that nature. Also organizing events, you know, whether it be focus groups, whether it be in-person meetings or webinars, things of that nature, or even marketing materials such as podcasts. So we really look for this fellow to come to us with ideas on the types of events that would be supportive in this area, the types of materials that would also be supportive of this group. As far as the knowledge that we're looking for this particular fellowship, we want someone that has experience with social media platforms and has the ability to effectively communicate with prosecutors' offices. So, and with that, I will turn it over to Vince Davenport to talk about the fellowship that he has in his.
Thank you, Christy, and I want to again thank everybody for taking time to join us today. This is really important. The work that we do here at the Bureau of Justice Assistance is carried out by some really dedicated professionals who have a lot of experience with the Department of Justice, with the BJA, and other walks of life, but haven't had any real world experience practitioners in the field and help outside to make sure that we're calibrated properly, that we're reaching the people we need to reach, and addressing the issues that we really need to address. That's really so important. So thank you all, and we look forward to seeing applications hopefully from everybody on the call. So I'm from the Law Enforcement Operations Division, and we deal with a variety of issues, and we're looking for one particular fellow to help us to develop information sharing strategies and protocols with law enforcement across the country. I'll just tell you just a little bit about the division. We deal with a variety of issues, including officer safety and wellness. We have a big portfolio there. We deal with justice information sharing, forensics, law enforcement training, technical assistance, and any number of other issues that affect law enforcement agencies. BJA, we're very fortunate to play a major role in the delivery of federal resources to state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies. But one of the most important aspects of our work is that the information and the resources have to reach those who actually need them and who can actually apply them for the benefit of the agencies and for the benefit of the communities. And as you might imagine, with roughly 18,000 law enforcement agencies across the country, this presents some real complex challenges and requires some innovative approaches. We work with a lot of national and regional and even local stakeholder organizations and associations, but getting the word out in a timely manner to agencies and communities that need these resources and that can benefit directly from these resources, it's a perennial challenge. And we're really hoping that this fellow can help us to improve our processes and really kind of take things to the next level to ensure that the information that's needed in terms of from local law enforcement actually reaches them. So this fellow will assist in promoting this outreach, communication, and engagement activities with law enforcement agencies and other stakeholders to spread the news and to enhance the awareness and to grow the awareness of BJA resources for law enforcement, and also to help kind of create this really important information loop so that we're constantly not only sharing information, but we're hearing information back across these same mechanisms so that we know really what's happening in the field for one important purpose, and that's so that we can be responsive to it. We want to know what the needs are all the time, and having a really effective communications network, and in many cases kind of these redundant network processes, communication processes between BJA and the law enforcement community across the country. That redundancy is important to ensure that not only information goes out, but that information comes in, and so that we can tweak programs if necessary in response to what we're hearing so that they're most effective and meet the needs of the field. The fellow will work to strengthen our existing lines of communications and to establish new pathways for sharing information in a timely manner. Not only information about funding resources, but information about training, technical assistance, all of these things that we know the federal government does well in terms of supporting state and local law enforcement. We want to make sure that the information and that the opportunities, especially the funding opportunities, get out to the field. This fellow can expect to work with any number of national stakeholders. We work regularly with the International Association of Chiefs of Police, national sheriffs, and a lot of other stakeholders who have vested interests in ensuring that this communications network works between the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the field. This particular fellow really should have significant demonstrable knowledge and experience with regard to social media platforms and other means of peer-to-peer communication within law enforcement communities. And this has been one of the big challenges of law enforcement over the years, is sharing information. Sometimes, jurisdictions that are right next to each other don't do a good job at sharing information. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing that and that we are providing information in a timely manner to the field every time we have it to offer. And so we're excited to have somebody from the field that has this experience to help us to grow and to build out this really important function within the Bureau. And so with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Becky.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vince. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our Associate Deputy Directors for walking through all of those different program areas. I know that I'm really excited about these opportunities at BJA and hope that you all are getting excited as well and hearing all of these different 12 different purpose areas to be able to potentially engage with us on. So I'm going to go over a little bit, a few more logistics on kind of the nuts and bolts of the solicitation, and then we'll get to Q&A. I do see some folks have been posing some questions in the Q&A box, so please keep those coming in, and as soon as I wrap up kind of some of these other nuts and bolts, I'll get to those questions that have been asked. So thank you for those questions so far. So a little bit, some basics on kind of award information. As we've talked about, we expect to make up to 12 awards, 1 per focus area. The maximum award amount is capped at $350,000, so that's per award. Total amount $4.2 million. The grant start date, you would plan for a grant start date of October 1st, 2021, and the period of performance would be 24 months. A note here about kind of hours. Fellows are generally required to spend a minimum of 1,500 hours during the duration of their fellowship on site at BJA, though BJA will consider shorter periods of time where the applicant makes the case that they still satisfactorily accomplish the goal of the solicitation. During the fellow's residency period, BJA will provide workspace equipment, including telephone, computer, office supplies, and internet access. I want to just kind of point out there's a bit more detail about the residency requirement in the solicitation on page 5 into page 6. So we also talk about kind of the current landscape in terms of pandemic issues and other considerations. Basically, there's flexibility built into this. So we've had some questions leading up to this webinar. Once the solicitation was released about the residency requirements, we do request that you consider the residency requirements, but please propose what you think is best in terms of your what you're able to do, and also would really help us accomplish the goals of your fellowship. So please keep that in mind. And again, refer to pages 5 and 6 for some more information about residency as well. So on the budget information, the funding level for each visiting fellow will largely be determined by kind of the total package submitted in the application. That can include salary and expenses, housing expenses, travel, and other limited administrative expenses. We will not fund salary or costs for any person other than the person to be placed in the fellowship, with the following exception. So BJA will fund small costs to first support staff person or contractor to perform support functions in completing research and or analysis, meeting support, or documented development insofar as to address a core need to accomplish the goals of the fellowship. I see a question in the Q&A that I'm going to go ahead and address right now, asking us to define small. We don't define it in the solicitation, and there's not any other information we can provide. But you present what you think is reasonable in terms of, under those functions to provide those support functions, and we'll consider that in the application. So there's not a definition of small, but we want it to be reasonable and tied to the program goals that you propose in your application. So again, the needs, whether it's salary or housing expenses, travel, limited administrative expenses, those must all be fully documented in the budget worksheet and the budget narrative, which are part of the application process in Just Grants. A little note about travel here. Travel can include travel associated with the fellowship's duties, travel from the fellow's home to BJA and back for the fellowship residency, depending on how that looks for what you propose, and also up to 2 trips to travel home during the period of the residency. This travel will not include local travel between the fellow's local residence and the office, or meetings during the period of residency at BJA. Excuse me, proposals primarily to purchase equipment, materials, or supplies will not be funded. And just a note, there's no match requirement for this solicitation. So the different application sections are listed here. I'm not going to go every one, but you can see the different ones that are required and also if applicable, depending on your unique situation, your unique application. A couple more details about the application sections. We are asking for a time task plan. This time and task plan will outline your goals and objectives of the fellowship and just summarize the major activities, the expected date of completion, again, with assuming an October 1st start date, and responsible agency or responsible person for that major activity. We are also asking, of course, for resumes and job descriptions, so please provide the proposed fellow resume. And also letters of support, or MOU. So we ask that you attach relevant letters of support and or MOUs between key partners to the project to reflect support, roles, agreements about collaboration, etc. And then if applicable, research and evaluation, independence and integrity is another attachment that would be required. The abstract is an important piece of this and a required document as part of your application. You actually will be submitting this through an online form in JustGrants. But what we ask for is that your proposal abstract is no more than 400 words, and that summarizes the project, including the primary activities, the deliverables and products. The service area is very important to include in that, the program area, that which of the 12 areas you're applying for, and who will benefit from the proposed project. There's a bulleted list here on this slide that you can see that make sure to hit all of these bullets, please. This is a very helpful information to us, and we use a program abstract for a number of reasons, especially during the initial BMR process, the initial review process. The program narrative, please note the page limit is 20 pages, so please do not exceed 20 pages, and we do ask for a 12-point font with 1-inch margins. The scoring is important for you to pay attention to here. So as these applications go through review, this is the guidance that we provide to peer reviewers on how to score your application. For each section of the solicitation, we provide details on what you should provide. For the application narrative, we provide details on what you should provide under description of issue, project design and implementation, and so forth. And so as we're providing guidance to peer reviewers, we're asking them to look for that information by section. So if you go to page 14 on the solicitation, this gives you the details of what is expected in the program narrative. And the peer reviewer is then asked to score each section, and the weighting of each section is listed here. So you can see the sections that have the higher weightings. That means that we want you to really kind of pay attention to those and provide a good amount of narrative that fits within each of those criteria that we list on page 14. So please pay attention to the scoring that we list, as that will really kind of drive the review process as well and helps you put together your application and emphasize those sections that are of most importance. So budget and budget narrative, this is a 24-month project period. So we will be asking for an itemized budget for each year of the grant. So that's something you can prepare for. And then just a quick note about kind of processes at BJ, prior approval, planning and reporting of conference meeting and training costs will be required. You don't have to seek prior approval before submitting an application. So please go ahead and propose in the application, your meetings and conferences and trainings that you want to do. But before they can actually be executed, we will seek prior approval internally. Some tips for you all. So we have a couple deadlines, and I might have mentioned this later in the presentation again, but just don't wait until the deadline to apply. There's a number of steps that need to happen for you all to get registered in grants.gov. The grants.gov deadline, again, is August 2nd, and the Just Grants deadline is August 16th. But we really, if you look at the first bullet here, in grants.gov, you'll be submitting the SF424 and the SFLLL. If those sound like a foreign language to you right now, I please encourage you to get online and try to get familiar with what the requirements are for grants.gov. We really encourage you to submit your applications at least 72 hours prior to the application due date, just in case there's any technical issues that you may need to address. There's also several layers or rounds of kind of registrations that you need to set up before getting actually registered in grants.gov. So please visit all of that, and we have some links to different guidance that we provided out there on the application process. So here we're getting into some trainings that have been developed for all applicants to BJA. So as I mentioned, the second deadline is to apply, submit your kind of full application materials into Just Grants. So there's a lot of resources available for you if you're not familiar with it yet on how to apply through Just Grants. So all these links here, and this again, we will share the slide deck afterwards, but all these links here, or we'll post it, provide you kind of just a quick trainings and checklists on how to apply in Just Grants. So I encourage you to take a look at this stuff now. There's also a great resource. If you guys aren't familiar with this, I would definitely suggest bookmarking this, but this is called the DOJ Application Submission Checklist. So we have a couple checklists built into the solicitation, but this checklist really provides kind of an overview guidance to all of the potential applicants, explains the two-part application process in grants.gov and Just Grants, and includes all these great kind of little tidbits of information. What do you need to do now as you're considering applying? What does it mean to get registered in grants.gov? How do you get, all set up in Just Grants? What happens in that 2-week time period between grants.gov and Just Grants? And some other useful tips. So definitely take a look at this now as you're preparing. And here's some important contact information. So because we do have the two-step process, you have 2 different help desks or technical support centers. So grants.gov, if you're having technical issues in that first round of submission for the August 2nd deadline, this is the grants.gov information here. And then Just Grants technical support. It's the second number and email listed here. This is when you're submitting the full application. And then finally, we have what we call the OJP Response Center. So this is as you're kind of looking at the application, have questions about kind of programmatic requirements and things like that, as a follow-up to this webinar, this is your place to go, is the OJP Response Center. And they'll, address any questions that you might have as you're, going through the application process and preparing your application materials. And if there's programmatic questions that need to be referred to one of us, they'll get in touch with us to address those questions. Okay, so again, I'm kind of emphasizing this quite a bit, but it is a very important process and we want to make sure you're prepared. So you have a couple of weeks before the first August 2nd deadline, but it is a 2-step application process and it's new this year. That's why we're so much emphasis on this. So in the grants.gov, you'll be submitting these 2 forms and then you'll have your full application submission into Just Grants by August 16th. Okay, so just a note, just to remember, we are utilizing this new system this year, Just Grants. If you come into any technical issues, you should reach out to the help desk at either Just Grants or grants.gov as soon as possible. It is really important that you document all your technical issues and that you also notify the help desk, the technical help desk, as soon as possible so they can try to help you before these deadlines come up. So keep that in mind as you're going through this process. And then as you submit your application, make sure that if you do have technical issues as that the deadline is approaching, that you also contact us at the OJP Response Center to document all of the issues that you've been having. If you've had issues, what the issues are, note that you've contacted the help desk and they're working on those issues. So just be in touch with us a lot through all of those different technical help desk numbers that I provide in the OJP Resource Center. So this is just a way for you to stay connected. Hopefully you're pretty connected to BJA already. You heard about this webinar, but if you're not following us on social media or you're not getting your email updates from BJA directly, please be sure to do that. If there's any changes to deadlines in the solicitation or any changes to, how things are listed in the solicitation, we'll announce it through all these mechanisms. So make sure that you're connected. Okay, so now we're going to get to Q&A. And I'm going to go ahead and moderate the Q&A. I'm going to just kind of read out some of the questions that I see here. I see quite a few questions here, so bear with me as I navigate through some of the questions. One of the first things I've seen asked a little bit, and just to reemphasize this, it's been answered, but it's also been shared in the chat box, is that the PowerPoint presentation and the recording of the webinar will be posted, and I think the link has been shared in the chat box and in the Q&A. So be sure that this will all get out to you as soon as possible. So be on the lookout for that. And then I just should note, almost every word that was in this PowerPoint is pulled from the solicitation. So you heard me reference page numbers and different things like that. So, hopefully you kind of go back to the solicitation and refresh your memory of what we talked about today as well. Okay, so a couple of general questions. One, just a question about kind of, can you be, do you have to be affiliated with an organization, or can you be a contractor, or can you be an individual? Just in terms of eligibility, a general answer to that is that we are looking for individuals. You don't have to be affiliated with an organization to qualify for this fellowship. So it can go either way, but we are seeking individuals to serve in this fellowship role. Okay, I'm going to get to a couple questions from Stefan. So the first question are the work of past fellows available for your review or for review? I actually, in the chat box early in the presentation, did put up some links in there. So what the links I've included, the chat starts with to learn more about past fellows visit, and then there's 3 links there. In the past, we've offered this fellowship program, I think in 2012, 13, and 2015. And we actually have program descriptions on each of these links. So if you click on those links, you can find the program descriptions for the fellows that we've awarded under each of those solicitation years. Another way to find past funding history is just to go to OJP or bja.gov, and you can look under funding and then past awards, and you can search by solicitation or keyword or whatever it might be. But I did include those direct links in there for you. The second question is, what guidance can you provide on budgeted salaries? And the additional questions about, can you provide guidance on allowable travel expenses? The only information we have on salaries is what I went over in the presentation today, but just please note that all of that is listed under the budget information in the solicitation, on page 12. So under budget information, we talk about salaries, the number of hours expected. In the solicitation, there's no mention of cap on salary. So, you propose what you think is reasonable for the project. But there's a little bit more information just about kind of, what the salaries, what that could cover, and then also the administrative expenses that I mentioned as well. So again, that's on page 12 in more detail. And then the guidance on allowable travel expenses, you'll need to abide by the federal travel guidelines. So when you're planning your budget for travel expenses, the travel, the cost estimates that you would include would be based on the federal travel guidelines. So you can Google that and take a look at that, but that's for the, looking at federal hotel rates in cities, per diem rates, and things like that. And that would be for in the U.S. only. The next question is, what guidance?
That's through those are through the General Services Administration, and you can Google GSA per diem rates, and that would give you the amount that's allowable for hotel, and then also meals and incidentals on a daily basis for travel to specific jurisdictions within the U.S.
Thanks, Ruby. What guidance can you give on the amount allowed to subcontractors for research? The RFP says small. I did reference that specifically in the presentation just now. We don't define small, and so we leave it up to you to propose something that aligns appropriately with what your application, what you're proposing in the application. The last question, I might need a little help from my colleagues here. In the set of questions is, can fellows seek to obtain a cooperative agreement from government organizations, including federal agencies, as part of the application? Betsy, can you remind me, do we typically award these as cooperative agreements?
Yes, these are generally issued as cooperative agreements, which is signaling our intent for substantial federal involvement. We might expect to see some adjustments as we work together on the project. And I think one other thing I would mention, I would definitely spend some time, particularly around pages 5 and 6, to look at some of the more of the details around our expectations, that this is really intended to be a very collegial kind of relationship during the residency period. We try to offer some flexibilities there, but one of the things we mentioned is we expect about 30% of your time when you're in the residence portion of your project is going to be focused not just on things relating to your proposed projects, but actually working and engaging with us in a collaborative manner on related projects where we could use your expertise and perspective. So for those reasons, we really want to see these as a cooperative agreement relationship.
Wonderful. Thank you, Betsy. I'm going to ask if you could answer the next question too, but so does the fellow have to designate 100% of their time to the fellowship, so 1 FTE, or can part of the fellow's time be used for other activities as long as the 1,500 hours of residency are met? So, for example, 70% towards the fellowship project and 30% towards non-fellowship activities, such as regular duties with their host organization. And is there a limit to how much time, what the split of time would be? So Betsy, if you wouldn't mind addressing that.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I'm understanding the distinction. I think we would not pay for activities that are not within the scope of the fellowship, whether that is the things that are proposed or this portion of time during the residency that went up to about 30% of the fellow's time would be spent on other related activities for BJA. If you look, we specifically talk about, just wanting to get to an average, overall of a kind of intensive full time. Try to offer a little bit of flexibility. Maybe it doesn't have to be 100% time, but we do want you here and engaged enough that you're not pulled in multiple directions. And to have some consistency, we do require a minimum of 1,500 hours being committed to being in the residency period where you're really focused with us. So we'll consider other things, but if it starts to sort of feel like you're being pulled in multiple directions, it can't be available to really engage fully with us. Those would be things we would be considering in making our decisions.
Great, thank you.
And
Betsy.
again, I don't, I know you've asked for like in the question there was a percentage of time of say 30%. I don't necessarily want to set one line or another. We don't have a set line, but what I will do is just reference kind of what we talk about in the solicitation. Again, this is, I think, around pages 5 and 6, and it says, during this period of residency, it's estimated, as I mentioned, about 30% will be devoted to collaborative work along with implementing your fellowship activities. We will consider a period for less than 9 months full-time residency as long as we have that 1,500 hours minimum, or a part-time schedule for a longer period, but the applicant has to make the case that the goal of the solicitation can still be accomplished with the approach. So really it's a matter of how you're presenting that information and then our evaluation of it.
That's great. Thank you, Betsy. A similar question just about hours and requirements, but how many hours are fellows expected to commit per week? I think the same response. I mean, there's some flexibility built in. We do not specify how many hours you have to commit per week, but we will, we ask that you propose how much you can commit, and we'll work with you to see what will work for the project and the execution of the project. So there is some flexibility built in there. And the expectation is that, once awarded, we'll work with you to accommodate schedules and kind of navigate and make decisions about, number of hours per week. And it might be on a case-by-case basis, or it will be on a case-by-case basis and project basis, right? So each individual associate here will work with the fellows once selected to work out those schedules. The next question is just about the SFLLL. May we just state not applicable if we do not engage in lobbying? I am not familiar with the form, but I would assume there's a checkbox for not applicable if you do not engage in lobbying. So I would encourage you to take a look at the form and see if there's a checkbox for that. Please know that it is a requirement to submit that form whether or not you engage in lobbying. So if you have questions about how to answer that form, I would definitely reach out to the grants.gov help desk, as Daryl has up on the screen here. Also, DUNS number for the fellowship is a follow-up question. Will we need our own DUNS number or SAM number? In order to submit an application in grants.gov, you actually will need to register for a SAMS number and a DUNS number. And actually, if you go to page 2 of the solicitation, that just shows you, gives you the link, where to register in grants.gov. And part of that registration process, you will need to obtain a DUNS number, which is the Data Universal Numbering System, and the SAM number, which is the System for Award Management registration or renewal if you already have it. So please, yes, you make sure that those you have met those requirements in order to submit your application in grants.gov. A question here about kind of partnering with other organizations or entities. The purpose of this solicitation is to seek fellowships that will work with BJA in partnership to execute the goals of the different purpose areas. So, we're not talking about kind of any other opportunities other than this solicitation right now to engage in working with those fellowships with that subject matter expertise and that field experience. So, definitely would encourage you to take a look at the programmatic goals as outlined in the objectives as well.
Becky, maybe this is Betsy. If I can jump on that, jump to add 2 other points on that. What I would say is this is a very unique program. A lot of times we're either seeking to implement, state, local, tribal demonstration programs or to fund national level projects. Every few years, along with the fellowship program, we also have what we call our field initiated program, where we encourage the field to submit their ideas, to test new ideas or fill gaps in the field. So if you're looking to fund those kinds of activities, that's not what the fellowship is for. And so if you start to sort of think to yourself, oh, I really kind of need 2 people on this project, not necessarily a small amount of help for me as the fellow, or I really think this is a collaborative project that has to happen with a couple of other folks, I'd encourage you to keep that. We don't anticipate issuing a field initiated this year, but we probably will in future years. And that would be exactly the kind of project you probably want to consider for that funding opportunity.
That's great, Betsy. Thank you for that. And I should also note that we do have many other solicitations open right now that are available for funding. So please visit, bja.gov and look under the funding tab to see all of our different open solicitations. You can see BJ's website right here, different funding opportunities that are available right now. To Betsy's point, if there's, kind of this more in-depth project that you're looking for your jurisdiction, definitely take a look at all those different funding opportunities that are available. And at this time, I think I've gotten through all of the questions that have been asked. I do want to acknowledge a couple of the comments that have been made. Thank you to some of you who have just made some general comments and acknowledgments of, the different priority areas. Thank you for all of that. I really do appreciate those comments, and we'll take those to note. Let me just look through one other box here. Okay, well, let me just ask my colleagues here on the phone if there's any other comments you'd like to make before we wrap up. Betsy, I'll ask you first.
Becky?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ruby.
Oh, I just see one question that was specific to one of the fellowship opportunities. It says, can you provide some of the motivating factors for identifying enhancing correction spaces and cultures as a priority area? So I'm happy to address that one. I think it was just one lingering one.
Yep, sure. No, go ahead. I saw that as well. Go ahead, Ruby.
Okay, sure. So in response to that, I would say that we still have some pretty stubborn recidivism rates, both when you look at arrest levels and reincarceration levels for people coming out of incarceration. When you do a 3-year look back, and then the Bureau of Justice Statistics has done even longer look backs depending on release cohorts. So when we look at those stubborn recidivism rates, it begs the question, what can we do differently to improve them? And so we invest a lot in reentry programs and using federal funds to incentivize what the research shows works to impact reentry, both what you can do behind the walls prior to release and post-release when people are back out in the community. In 2019, we funded several projects that are looking at training and correctional staff health and wellness. And this is one area that we have not looked into. So the physical spaces and the cultures that they engender within jails and prisons, and how do those contribute to the successful reintegration efforts and outcomes for people. So that's really the motivating factor. It's something that I think we've been interested in looking more at and have touched on it around the edges, but there also seems to be a lot of innovation and testing of new ideas with regard to changing spaces and addressing correctional cultures, and that's something that BJA wanted to invest further in.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ruby. Actually, I see a question in the chat just sent to me. So sorry, Tammy, for just seeing this. But there was a question about how an applicant may find housing during the residency. So Betsy, I hate to punt to you again, but I just wondered if you could talk about past experiences maybe with fellows that you worked with and how they've tackled finding residency. I don't think we provide that support from BJA, but any tips for the applicant to think through that?
Well, first of all, I think please note that we've really tried to structure this. We don't expect you to be starting on board with us in the residency period on day one. There is a period of time we recognize sometimes within your job, or maybe if you're working in an academic setting, you've got to kind of be able to plan accordingly. So please recognize that, having a multi-year award was really designed to kind of give you some time to prep, to be able to transition, and then, move forward. So we're hoping through that you will have time to be able to arrange for different things. We don't unfortunately support, and honestly, this is the largest cohort we would ever have of fellows. So, we've tended to have a couple of fellows that we'll fund in each round. So for that reason, we haven't necessarily had a lot of formalized supports for them. But what I would say is, when you're budgeting, you can think about, some of those costs and being able to build that within, sort of your costs around your salary and expenses, and also really encourage you to think carefully with regard to your travel-related expenses to make sure you're building resources in to be able to travel in to start the residency. And I believe we allow for several trips during the period of the residency to be able to go back and forth and then come back at the end. I think the other thing I will say is I will acknowledge that, given pandemic, the federal government currently is in a full-time telework status. That may change in the near future, but we recognize that there are some uncertainties there, and it could be, a period of time before we would actually be able to host anybody physically in person. But unfortunately, we don't, on the sort of support for the housing piece, we're not able to offer any direct assistance.
Great, thank you, Betsy. Okay, I think I've gone through everything. Let me just open it up very quickly since we have a few minutes. Is there any of my colleagues who want to say just anything else to add to their comments on the webinar today?
Well, I think the only thing I just say is the breadth of what BJA does is very, very, very broad, and we have a very committed and hardworking and talented staff. But I think we continue to get better and deeper in our work when we have that opportunity to work closely with folks who are out there coming fresh off of having done work in the field, kind of building on Ruby's point about, kind of the vision behind one of her fellowships. We're always looking for, new ways of thinking and fresh ideas, and particularly when we're in the transition of a new administration, really kind of opening up that thinking. So we're really excited to get your applications and your creative ideas on ways that we can continue to keep our work fresh and relevant to what the field needs.
Becky, I'll just add to that, first off, obviously, thank you again for joining us today. And, now that you've heard the information that you've heard today and you've had a chance to look at the solicitation, if it seems like a good fit and you can make this happen and contribute to a bigger cause, that's wonderful, and we really look forward to seeing your application. But if you make the judgment that it's just not a good fit for you, or it just can't work for right now, that's fine too. And if that's the case, we want you to keep doing what you're doing out there. We want you to know that we appreciate everything you're doing out there. We know it's not easy to be anywhere in the criminal justice space today. Our nation is trying to figure things out, and as we move forward, we're going to try to be, as collaborative as we can, and we do need people like you, whether you join us here at BJA for a residency fellowship or whether you keep holding down the fort and doing the great things that you're doing out there. We just want to say thank you, and we want you all to be safe.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. And oh, go ahead, Christy.
I'm sorry, Becky. This is Christy. I don't think there's anything that I can add that hasn't been said already, especially after what Vince just said. But I would encourage you all to really take a look at it. You know, we learn best from people that are outside of us most often, and so we could really benefit from the expertise that you would individually bring to the different fellowship opportunities. So thank you for your attention today.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. And we are so excited about this here at BJA. So we hope that you know, if you do have the interest after learning all about, you know, kind of all the details of the solicitation, submit an application by those 2 deadlines. Really love to have you here and join us to be a fellow here at BJA. So thank you all very much for participating on this webinar today. Thanks to my colleagues for presenting great information and getting us excited about this fellowship program. And we look forward to hearing from you all soon. Take care.